Dude, if you can't add value to the people in your immediate room, you're not adding value to the world. Like, get out of here. Like, if I can't
say that again.
If you cannot add value to the people in the room, you're not adding value to the world. It's impossible.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Josh Lustig Podcast, where we're bringing you real conversations that actually matter. Today we have an incredible guest, Matt Todd, and if you don't know him yet, you are about to. Matt is a speaker, an educator, and also the host of a rapidly growing podcast here in Idaho called The Ranch Podcast. But more than that, he's someone who just gets it. He gets the power of taking immediate action in your life, how to build, real relationships, and also what it takes to pursue a life of purpose and impact. So in this episode, Matt shares his journey of moving to Idaho, building something from nothing, literally from scratch, and why the power of conversation is more important now in today's day and age than ever before. We go pretty deep on mindset, networking, the long game of success, and why most people just honestly quit before they even get started. This conversation is filled with wisdom, a little bit of humor even, and practical tips on how to live a life most only dream of. So stick around, you won't want to miss this conversation. Let's get right into it with Matt Todd. So we got Matt Todd here from the Ranch Podcast. Thanks for joining the show. Really intrigued by what you're doing. Why did you start the Ranch Podcast? Like, tell me, what do you got going on here in Idaho?
Well, I mean, I didn't have anything 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So I had plenty of time to start a podcast. I'll tell you that much. So I moved with my family in January of 22 and got here and moved, obviously, from the state that shall not be named, but moved and came up here and was very happy to be here. We moved for a lot of very specific reasons. The state did not let us down. And very quickly thereafter, you start realizing, like, hey, what is this place? Like, what's going on here, right? And what I realized is, like, I have no idea what's going on in this state. And very clearly, I could see problems that were percolating as I kind of oriented myself. I was looking around, like, trying to understand who the people were, why they were the way they were, what my place was. And I realized it's like, there's not even a way for me to understand what Idaho is, right? Like, what newspaper?
Just they moved into this foreign land, basically.
It's not just that. I knew there was a tension between native Idahoans and people like myself who had moved here, right? Now, whether or not that was true or not, I'm like, I know there are at least some people that aren't happy about it. Okay, I totally understand. Like, my bad, got it. But beyond that, how do I understand the politics, right? Like, I moved here and I was like, oh, people really like freedom here. That's great. There's a Freedom Foundation here. That's fantastic. Like, I don't know anything about it though. Right now, whether or not you like the Idaho Freedom Foundation or not, it is very hard to understand who they are, what their place is in Idaho, what's going on. And I, of course, had a knee-jerk reaction like almost everybody who's a transplant. It's like anything that even closely resembles my former state has to be bad, right?
Sure.
But I didn't orient myself to, like, wait, what's actually good though? Because you can't just say that's bad and therefore anything that's not that is good. That's not true too. They're bad all over the place. So I started essentially just trying to figure out, like, okay, well, who could I talk to? And the answer was like, oh, there is no one. It's like, okay, who could I follow? No one, right?
Like, to get clarity on what it actually means, like what this foundation means, what this organization means, who stands, just because you're a Republican or a Democrat or somewhere in between, who actually is bringing clarity to the issue.
Listen to this. Listen. Californians don't understand Idaho. Okay. That's just the way this goes. But nobody knows why. Okay. Here's a problem. If you live in California, there's like one Republican. He's got a shotgun, maybe, and he goes duck hunting, probably, right? And that's it. And everybody knows that's the guy. And it's like, okay, great, no problem. And like, I don't even mind hunting at all. It's like, awesome. I wish I went duck hunting with the guy, but like, the guy didn't invite me, right? I was not his guy. Anyway, but you move here and you cannot conceptualize the gradient of conservatism, okay? There's one dude and he goes duck hunting. Here, you have the guy who lives on the mountaintop who doesn't believe the federal government exists. And you go all the way down to the chick in Boise with purple hair and face tattoos who's also conservative, which doesn't really make sense to me still. But and like everyone in between. So you're like, okay. So like the nose thing that they put on but you're still conservative.
But
like,
you still,
how do you
still
mean
love guns.
Right. And
How's
then
that?
like you're okay, wait, who's conservative? And that's what I found out really quickly in 22. Everybody had weaponized and was trying to own the word conservative, right? Like we're the real conservatives. It's like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
Just like freedom. What does freedom mean to you? Because do we want the Portland style of freedom where it's like you're free to really do anything? Or do we want the Idaho style freedom? It's like, no, you're free to draw between these lines. Because we also have freedom from that excludes people's capacity to infringe on your rights or your safety or things like that. Like freedom means different things. That was the problem that I had to confront in 22, which is like, wait a minute. What the hell is going on? Like, who are these people? So I had done a podcast in my former life when I was an SAT tutor. I had done a podcast. My students really, I talked a lot of trash to them. You can imagine.
Sure.
Right? And they're like, you should start a podcast. So I start one and it became this real center piece of the community because I was the only person willing to engage deeply into conversations with people on all sides of issues. Right. And over the pandemic, that's really when it kicked off. It was like, oh my gosh, man, like, you don't want to go back to school. You're like a teacher. You don't want to go back to school for anything. And over here, you have the parent whose kid is about to commit suicide or did commit suicide saying, we need to get kids back in school. And you're both just screaming at each other.
Right.
Like, well, how about like I just invite both of you in and we can just talk about this? Can we just like, is that okay? Can we just chat? So that's what I did there. And I knew if I did it right, that would be valuable here. I didn't know how long it would take, who it would be valuable for specifically. But like, look, you're married. You've been married for almost a decade, right?
Yeah.
Right. Liz, is there anything you can do when you get in a fight, aside from eventually just swallowing your pride and sitting down at the table with your wife and being like, all right, hon, what do you want? Like, I'll put the laundry away. Like, what is it you want?
Yeah.
Right. Like
it has to be a come to the table moment, if you will, and actually talk about what's going on.
You will never, ever get past anything unless you just come to the table and just say, look, all right, look, we're stuck together. Mm-hmm. What do you want? Okay, this is what you want. This is what I want. Can we compromise? Can we figure something out? And that's what we ultimately have to do. Like, that's how we actually get real information. Yeah. I'm not saying both sides are always valid. Sometimes you find out things when you sit at the table is like, dude, that's trash. Like, what you're saying is ridiculous. But that's what you do. So that's what I started doing. And I didn't know anyone, right? Which is good and bad because I wasn't like tainted by a party or an affiliation. But it was also really rough because I don't know anyone and like I'm a nobody. So to get people on the show in the first goings, as I'm sure you know, it's very hard.
So I want to talk about that for a second. So like we teach a lot of communication to like through our new movement, Ignite Gen Z for younger people. And we think that communication is like the building block of skills. And I'm curious, obviously, like you have a history, I believe, UC Berkeley, and you have a degree in rhetoric and all this. I'm really curious, like your take on, okay, you're brand new to the area. You, like you said, you don't know anybody. You have a mission. Is the mission enough to like enroll people? Like, how did you go out and start networking, to start with?
That's a great question. And I think it comes back to just basic cost benefit analysis. Okay. Like it costs somebody something to appear. Right? Mm-hmm. Like no matter who it is, it's an ask. Even if it's just that they have to show up. And especially when they don't know you and they don't know what you're doing, there's a real cost associated. You have to offer value. This has to be a voluntary exchange of like, I have this thing to offer you. Would you please come and give me what you have, which is your time and energy? Sure. That's it. Now, you see this with young people. The number one thing I would tell people in my former life as an educator, it was like, listen, the first thing you do when you go to college, and first class you go to, you just walk up to your professor like, hey, I'm really interested about this. Could I take you out to coffee? Even if they're like, hey, I'm busy, at least they remember you as the person who was interested enough to offer them a cup of coffee. Yes. That's not that hard to do. Go to office hours just once, just show up. Just show up and be like, hey, I got a question about this thing. I don't even care if you actually had the question. Maybe you knew the answer. Just engage the person. Pretend like you care. Fake interest. Engage in something because before you know it, you will find something that's actually interesting, most likely. And even if you're not interested in the subject at the start, if somebody's committed their lives to teaching it, they're going to have something likely interesting that you're like, I never knew that. That's wild. Like, okay, thank you for letting me know. It's offering value to somebody. That's how you get people talking. Don't be super selfish, right? Don't make it all about you. Listen more than you talk. And that's how you get people to voluntarily. That's what I did. I was like, I started hyper local. I did not try to take on the world. I did not try to save everyone.
Yeah.
It was like, no, I had my neighbor on. We talked about like the HOA meeting, right?
Yeah.
And I shared that, which is with our perspectives of what happened with my little tiny community. At the time, it was like 200 houses. So then like 200 people watched. Like, oh, this is valuable. Like for the people that couldn't make it to the HOA meeting, this is what happened. This is good, bad, the other. Couple episodes later, I did an episode on the playground around my neighborhood elementary school. That was getting torn up. There was some big brouhaha with the PTA. So I had the PTA president on. I'm like, can you explain to me what's happening? Like, I don't understand. Like,
Start small and then it starts growing.
Dude, if you can't add value to the people in your immediate room, you're not adding value to the world. Like, get out of here. Like, if I can't
say that again,
if you cannot add value to the people in the room, you're not adding value to the world. It's impossible. Start small. Start in manageable bites. And then as you refine, get bigger and bigger and bigger and continue adding value. You don't deserve people's attendance on the show. You don't deserve people's participation in whatever pet project you have. You need to add value to other people, and then they will want to engage with you, and it will at some point become reciprocal. And if it's not, if somebody's just a sponge, then like you'll figure that out too.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And I think what's interesting to me is the more that I get around people that have really good skills in networking and relationship building, the more I realize every conversation almost starts the same way. We sit down before we started, turn the cameras on, and we immediately start batting back and forth ways that we could help each other. The first thing you said out of your mouth was, "Wow, what a great space here, this building." And that was a nice compliment to me. So I immediately like you more than I did 5 seconds ago. It's just human nature, right? And then the next thing that's out of your mouth is, "Hey, I would love to have you on my show sometime."
Sure.
And then the next thing out of my mouth is, "Hey, I would love for if you have a guest out of town that we could like use the jet to like bring people into town if you want." And like, it's just an exchange of like master networkers, and I'm calling you one. They will always do that. They will always find a way to give more than they receive.
I appreciate that. A friend of mine, former client I worked with is, you may actually know him, Paul Lincioni from the Table Group. He does the Working Genius. He had the Working Genius platform. Doesn't matter. Big business consultant guy. And I worked with one of his children for SAT prep. So I randomly get to know this guy. I don't even know who he is, but then I find out he's in every single airport library. Like he's like a rampant author. But when I met him, he was like, the thing about you, you're all offense. Like you're so offense with what you give and the value you bring, just unrelenting, that it's like disarming. People don't even understand what's happening because you're not asking for anything in return. And ultimately that path leads to benefit for everyone, but you make no qualms about like, no, I'm going to throw more your way just because I believe in it. And it's like, I brought you guys hoodies. I love hoodies. Like that was one of the big things I did with my teenage SAT kids. I had a bunch of hoodies. You could only get a hoodie if you were my student. But if you were my student, you got any hoodie you wanted. And I was like thousands of dollars every month on new hoodies. And the kids just really appreciated them and they felt good about it. And they, but again, bring value to somebody's life and then they'll be happy. The other thing that ties into this that I think is really key. Somebody asked me at the beginning of 24, I'd been at the podcast about a year and a half. The most impressive thing I had done in January of 24 was interview like the Eagle mayor, right? And for those of you that don't know Eagle, it's like 40,000 people.
Sure.
Not a gigantic city. And I interviewed the mayor. I was like, I did it. I got the mayor. Boom.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. So I was like super pumped, right? And somebody asked, they're like, well, what's your goal for 24? I was like, honestly, I'd love to get the governor. That would be it. And instantly, this person who is somebody who's actually connected, she's like, okay, well, we could do this. We could do this. I was like, no. He'll come to me. Right. And because my idea was that ultimately, if I brought enough value to the community, there would be value for these leaders in the state to come on. So instead of going straight to them before I was like cooked and actually ready, I just waited and kept bringing more and more and more value. And then somehow through like 1,000 random little threads, I got connected with him in November, and he came on the show. And it was not because I was like emailing his advisors and harassing people and asking and pestering. It was, no, I brought value, and they saw value, and they're like, it would be valuable for us to do this. Let's do this. And we're like, great. So security detail shows up and he rolls with like an entourage.
I've seen that episode that you did. I've seen that interview. You did a fantastic job just having a real conversation with a real leader in real time. Yes. So kind of like build it and they will come in a networking way.
Dude, like, Kevin Costner, he had it back in the day. Like, it was just baseball style. Yeah, but that should be it. Shouldn't it always be, I have a value proposition for you right now. Mm-hmm. I have something to offer you right now. And even if the value proposition is one-sided, lopsided to you, there's value in you engaging with me. Like, that's one of the number one things people can do. Have value.
Yeah, and don't have commission breath. You know, I feel a lot of young people that are super ambitious, and we're going to talk about young people for a second, but that are super ambitious, I think we sometimes, get it a little wrong. And it's like, I'm going to go aggressively out to the world. And yeah, there's a certain grit that's good there, but it's like, how do you go and bring value to somebody else without an expectation in return? I had to tell somebody that was, they 21 years old, and they were on the phone with me the other day, and they're like, what can I do? Like, what can I do to like get faster at this? Like, I feel like I'm doing everything I can. I'm beating down the doors. I'm calling. I'm doing all this. And I'm like, look, you're A+ for hustle. That's important, work ethic. But you're doing everything for you. Let's just name this person Ben, right?
Ben.
You're
calm down, Ben.
You're doing it for Ben.
Calm down.
Yeah. How about go talk to the guy? Yeah. Go talk to your neighbor Jim. Go talk to your neighbor Sally, as if you had nothing on your agenda other than just to make their day. And you do that well. How do I go out and just make their day? How do I go and bring value to them without anything in return? So maybe say another couple things on just like a time where you actually did that. You didn't really have a big expectation about, this relationship, but you just did something random, whether it was a nice gesture, whether it was inviting somebody on your show, and then like snowballed. You know what I'm saying? Like, it connected to the next thing, and the next thing, it turned into something bigger. Has that happened to you?
Oh, like 1,000 times, man. But I didn't understand the value of that. Like you're saying, Ben, I had to go through this process where the old adage of like, the more you give, the more you get, right? We understand that, right? Like, everybody understands that's the thing, but you don't understand the power of that when you're first starting out, right? Or it's hard to understand the value. And it's, even if you're like, well, I think this is the right thing to do, it's hard to believe it. Like, you got to believe it. So like, I'll tell you right out of the blocks, I'm starting my education company. The week I graduate college, I start tutoring privately. I've never had a job. I didn't have a resume. I didn't major in business. I literally was like, I started tutoring when I was at Cal because I went in as a math major. I fell in love with writing. So I studied rhetoric. And so I started tutoring the other Cal students because I was like, well, I know math really well. And I know how to write now too. Like, it's really easy. So I started tutoring. So I graduate from Cal. That week, somebody's like, hey, do you want to tutor this kid? Just like a 5th grader. I was like, sure, man, whatever. So the point is, as I realized that's what I wanted to do, I'm like 23. This is hilarious. So my wife and I, it's 2005. I've been tutoring for like 10 months or something. Christmas is coming around. I know nothing about business or how to like network. I don't have a mentor. Because again, you got to realize, I graduate, I don't have a boss. And I'm like, what kind of shirt do I wear? It's like, you just figure it out. Right? Like, and then like, I slowly upgraded from like polos to dress shirts, the whole thing. But 2005 rolls around, right around the holiday season. I'm like, I know what I should do. I saw this thing on like home and gardening when I was a kid. They made custom, it was like Martha Stewart or something, and they made custom baskets, right? So I go to Michael's, no joke. I don't know anything about this, and I buy a bunch of wicker baskets and like cellophane wrapping, and I go to this, fancy Italian place. I put all these things together, and like, then I spend the wife and I, she was like my ride or die, man, down to party. So we get in the car with like giant coffees, and we drive for like hours to these random college counselors' houses. So the independent college counseling industry is essentially like, you got a kid, you want help getting to college. You feel like your kid at the high school is like just one of 100. So you're like, hey, let's hire this person whose job it is to like really focus in on my kid. Great. It totally makes sense. Those people might look at your kid and be like, Johnny needs an SAT tutor. And Matt's a great one. You should call Matt right here. So I was like, I got to get these people to tell them. This is like, so again, offer
Referral
value.
partners,
That's right. So that was like my first real step into like giving something. And that worked really well. Right. But I don't know that I believed it yet because I hadn't seen it play out time and time again. So I went through the motions. I delivered all these things. People were happy. Yeah, I got business, but it was like, is this really the way this works? I can tell you for sure by the time, like 7 years later, I did something where I knew, I believed this is the play. I do this entrance essay seminar for this local high school. So you got to write a college entrance essay for, you're going to, where'd you go to school?
I went to U of I for 4 months and then dropped out. So I'm
Good.
bad at
There you go. No, it's fine. Did you write an essay for U of I?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you got to write an essay. Okay, fine. Yeah. And you don't know how to write the essay, but your high school is like, hey, we'll put on a seminar. We'll hire this crazy guy, Matt. He'll come in and do a seminar on entrance essays.
That's what you're doing.
That's what I would do. I was like the go-to guy for the high schools because like, it's a lot of energy, a lot of ideas. So I go and do this essay seminar. This kid, Sebastian, leaves the essay seminar. Now, theoretically, the way that the schools pitched it to me is they're like, hey, you could convert these kids to being like your private essay clients. And my answer was, I'm not looking to get paid. I don't care. Like, I like these kids. I like helping. It's a 2-hour time frame. What do I care? I'll lose 2 hours. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Do a good service.
Maybe
one of them will be the president someday.
Maybe. So this kid, Sebastian, goes home and he's like super fired up about so he ends up calling me and we end up talking on the phone for, like 45 minutes. Again, not charging him about his essays, about how to write them, all these things. He ends up getting into, I think it was Santa Barbara. And I find out where the kid lives. Now, mind you, I've never made $1 off this kid. I find out where he lives. I buy a Santa Barbara hoodie and I take it and I drop it off at his house. I never meet his parents. I just leave it on the doorstep. And for years, I would hear from people who were like, oh, I got your number from Sebastian's family. I never made $1 from Sebastian. I never asked for anything in return. I was happy to help him. And if they never referred anyone to me, that was fine. But by that point, I believed, I was like, this is going to work and it's the right thing to do. Like how much better, like there's nothing better than finding out you get into a college and somebody gets you like that hoodie or they get you the hat and you're like, oh, I did it. I did it. Yeah. Like, I hope that kid slept in that hoodie for like a year, didn't even wash it. It's such a fun thing to be part of. And if you can find your niche like that, which is what I did for, almost 2 decades. It was like, I can be part of this journey for these people and I can pop in right at the right time, offer value in actual value with application stuff, but also, they need somebody to believe in them. They needed like
life.
Yes. Yeah.
Like just that belief in them.
Yes.
Most kids don't have somebody that believes in them other than maybe like their parents, but like they kind of know that their parents are supposed to say that, right? If they have good ones. Most people don't have somebody, a adult that's a third party that actually believes in them. And you did that for a lot of kids and are doing that. How fascinating. Right. I mean, one thing you said that stuck out to me is, I want to go back to it, is there's many times in your life that you had to just go through the motions and believe that it was going to work out. Like you're going to just trust that it's going to work out. It's like kind of like blind faith a little bit. Yes. Like, hey, I'm going to start this podcast. I have no idea if people are really going to watch it or not. But I'm going to start and do the motions because I know that a year from now, 2 years from now, whenever, things are going to start popping off. I'm just going to do the work. Most people need so much proof of concept before they start taking actions. I'm curious on this. How big, do you take a long time to make most decisions? Or are you cut right to I'm just going to start acting and hoping things work out and kind of make my way along the way? Kind of talk about that balance.
Okay, this is actually interesting. I was talking to my wife about this 6 months ago because I find it interesting that the time you need the most courage in life is when you have the least reason to actually believe in yourself. When you're young, you need guts, but you have no reason to believe it's going to work. Like when you're 22, right? Yeah. And at this point, it's like, I don't need to take big risks because I've taken risks. So I don't need to have guts like I needed when I was 22. And I have every reason to believe in myself. So it's like, this is inversion. But when I'm 22, I really need to take chances. And I have no background to believe or have any faith in myself. So it's such a terrible position to be in as a young person that you're like, this is where you got to take a shot when you don't have any reason to go through that. But like for me, the decision-making process for me is not a very hard thing. Kiyosaki, I remember reading his books when I was like 22, and like, listen, most unsuccessful people take a long time to make decisions and then they change their minds immediately. It's like successful people don't take a long time to make decisions and they don't change their minds.
Amen. Say that again.
Man, most unsuccessful people take forever to decide what they're going to do. And then the second something bad happens, gone. They have no staying power, right? But successful people decide quickly. They take a direction, they take a course of action, and they will not stop.
I freaking love that. That's like the entire movement that we're pioneering is like, take action now. You know, why are we waiting around so much? What's going to change a month from now what's going to change circumstantially that's going to, make it that much better a month from now or a year from now or 10 years from now than just literally today? Andrew Carnegie used to have that famous story of like, he's going to promote this gentleman. And then the gentleman walked into his office and he was going to give him this big promotion and go to a new city and be the manager of a factory, a steel plant. And he pulls out his pocket watch. He says, "Hey, I want you to do this. Are you up for the task?" And he hits the timer. And he said, if that decision wasn't made by the time the timer went off, like 60 seconds or whatever, he's like, I'm out. Because he wants his leaders of his factories to have that skill of taking decisive, quick action. And that stuck with me, just like the Robert Kiyosaki thing.
Yeah, yes, 100%. So for me, again, it's not a decision process that's difficult. For me, it's more of like, look, are you in the questions, like, are you willing to do what's going to have to be done over the next like 5 years if you make your decision? And that's the only thing that really matters to me. Like, because I know what goes into it and I know I can do it. But the question is, ultimately, is that going to be worth it? Like with the podcast, it was like, listen, I knew what I was getting into when I started it. I'm a nobody. I build the studio by myself. I know it's going to be an insane lift. Here, it's like, I'm 2.5, 3 years in, like things continue to take off, but it's like, listen, I'm not even in it for the 2.5 year mark. My view was always, look, and in the first day I started, I'm like, this is a successful podcast in 10 years. This is just day one of that 10-year process. Right. And so do you care where you are at year 3, if you've conceptualized the 10-year show? No, you're just like year 3, you're not even halfway there, bro. Like, you're not even a third of the way there, right? Like you're going to have, you have to view it differently and believe in that process along the way, which is ultimately, it's like, here's a great example. Any young person, if we're talking to young people, any young person knows the pain of social media, right? I have a good friend who has a product that that is a barbecue oriented product. It's really awesome, by the way. And he's just getting it off the ground, but he doesn't do any social media. Okay. So now at 42, he's going through this process of like learning the socials, right? Yeah. Like he doesn't know anything about Instagram. He doesn't know anything about TikTok. He doesn't know anything about Facebook. It took him forever to get like a Facebook account that would even work. He's 42, bro.
Totally. Like learning from the ground up.
Yeah, right. Like the 12-year-olds are better than he is. But so he's going through this process. And as such, he starts sending me these like little motivational things, like these little motivational memes. Like one of them was, everybody starts at 0. Everybody starts with 0 followers. I'm like, I'm aware, Max. Again, good friend of mine. But what is interesting is I was telling him is like, look, I just went through a big, at the time, I was like, I just went through a big jump. Like the viewers jumped up like 40% in, a very small period of time. And I said, look, before that, it was this 4-month lull where I was doing the exact same stuff. I was having great conversations. I was producing, consistent content. I was doing all these things. Yeah, always getting better, always looking to improve. But then one thing hit, right? And then once that thing hits, people come and find the other content that I laid on the table. It was just that one appetizer that I sent out. They're like, what else is over here? And they're like, oh my God. And they gorge on the content. They're like, this is great. But it's this process of discovery. And that's the thing. It's like, I knew even when you go through lulls, you keep posting because you'll never get to that boom unless you continue posting. You can't self-assess in the moment. It has to be a longer term, like, the assessment should be, am I doing the process correctly? Not what are the results of the process, right? Do the process, engage in the process, believe in the process. The results come whenever they come. But as long
Reps
as your
versus
process is correct, you're on the right track to the results.
100% reps versus results.
That's right.
Like if you focus on just doing the reps, you know that you're going to get fit. If you just do the reps, you know you're going to get followers in social media. If you just do the reps, that's a really, really good lesson. I mean, there's a bunch in there that you were talking about. One of the things I loved is going from, hey, a 10-year plan. Right. My example is, we sold our company for $50 million and it was a nice exit. It took 9 years or 8 years, whatever, to do it. And if you would look at year one, made $14,000. I was working harder that year than any year, surely more than a year ago when we were making millions of dollars. I was working way harder. It was way more stress. I had much less belief in myself than I do now, back to all those early moments. Right. And you look at, okay, if I would look at that, instead of saying I made $14,000 that year, if you had a company in, let's just use easy math, 10 years that was worth $50 million, then if you take 10 years, I actually made $5 million that year worth of value in my life. If I take the 10-year stretch, the total value extracted from it was 50. That effort in year one was the building block that got you to the end. Really, the value of that's not 14,000, it's 5 million.
God,
right?
I have never heard somebody articulate it as like an amortization schedule like that. That is so on point and so beautiful. Damn it, man. I was not expecting that. Like, that's such a great point. Yes, if you look at a 10-year time frame, there's no way you get the 50 million without day one. You can't say day one was useless if it was absolutely the number one thing that got you to the 50. Because the 50 doesn't come without day 1, day 2, day 3, day 20, day whatever, right? Day 3,000, right? I mean, imagine how frustrating it would have been if, like, for everybody that gives up on things. And look, like the idea is like, don't give up. It's like, yeah, look, sometimes you should give up. Like sometimes your baby's ugly. And that's fine. Like you should know when it's like, or figure out, okay, if I want to keep doing this, if I don't like the results in some time frame, like you have to have self-assessment. Are you getting better?
Sure.
Right? Because even if you're not getting results from one particular metric, if you're getting better, then that's a different metric. Like if you look at some of my first interviews, oh my God. Like I don't have a background in audio video. Like I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah,
right?
but you just did it. That's the point.
And every time an episode would come out, I'd be like, something's wrong with that. Like, the hell's wrong with it? I don't even have the vocabulary. It's like, look, I'm not a big wine guy, but like if I went wine tasting, I don't even have the vocabulary to describe wine. Yeah, like, and it was the same thing with me assessing the cinematic quality. There's like, I don't know 100%. Like, there's like, it looks like gritty in the background. What's the gritty? So I'd call an ex-student who I really liked, and I gave him a dump truck of value. So whenever I call Andre picks up my phone, and he was like, just studying film, like really bright. And he's like, oh, it's your ISO. I was like, are you speaking English? Like, I don't know what ISO is. Right? So we'd have these conversations and I would keep learning. So even though I didn't have the metric of like followers and views, I had the metric of I'm getting better. Right. And again, I couldn't be here now today producing things for, national level senators and congressmen and governors and things like that if I hadn't gone through day 1, day 2, episode 3, 4, 5, 6. Like,
yeah, that gritty third episode is what got you to here.
It was so rough.
Right? It got you 0 followers. It might have even got you negative followers, right?
Guaranteed.
But if you didn't have that experience, then none of this would be possible.
Bro, I'm getting pumped up right now. Like I'm getting fired up. Like let's get back at it. Yeah, 1,000%. 1,000. Yeah. Like, let me ask you something. How did you know that though? Did you have mentors? What happened with me, not like you, is I graduate from Cal. I start my tutoring company, and my first tutoring client was a retiring real estate broker. And she, after like a few months of watching me, she was like, okay, I don't know what's going on with this guy, but like he's somebody who is trying to learn and trying to understand. I didn't come from money. I didn't understand money at all. Yeah. And she saw him, like I went to Barnes & Noble one day and bought like a 2-foot high stack of every financial book, right? I like read Kiyosaki, and then he had a bunch of recommendations at the end of Rich Dad Poor Dad. I bought them all, read them all. Just like,
love that. Immediate action, dude.
Immediate. Boom. And I was like, I'm learning something today, baby, like right now. So she saw that, and instead of going, I realized my avenue to financial freedom was going to be through real estate, and I used the tutoring instead of leveraging up tutoring as a lot of people do or attempt to do. Like, listen, I don't have a lot of skill sets. I can make fun of 16-year-olds real well. Managing people, I don't know if that's my jam. So for me, I was like, okay, why don't you just leverage your own capacity in tutoring and utilize that for hard assets. That was my avenue towards longer term, wealth production. That was my thing. And I only knew that because I started asking questions of those people, the real estate people, because I started hanging out in those circles. I was like, I don't know what this is. Can you explain to me? Offering value. Can I take you out to lunch? I'd love to buy you a coffee. Hey, I really like that thing. Could I ask you a question about it? Really wanting to learn.
And that's how you got your mentors. Same
Successful people. That's right. Successful people want to teach you. If somebody's successful, they love telling somebody how they did it.
Amen to that.
So just ask them, like, I'd love to know what you did. So what my question is to you at 19, you drop out of college. What was like, what mentor or what reason did you have to believe like, all right, I can do this, or like, this is the right path?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm huge on mentorship. For me, it was when I was 17 years old, I had a teacher that made me read a book. He said, Josh, this is not going to be fair. I don't want to hear any complaints. You're going to read this book. It was called Leadership and Self-Deception. And he said, you're going to read this book, and it's kind of like a business book, kind of a leadership book. Read the book and give a 45-minute presentation next week, this time, to the class. And nobody else has to do it, so I don't want to hear anything. But if you don't do it, you're going to fail the class. Oh. I'm like, first of all, can you even do that? Like, is this illegal to do
I'm going to call my mom right now.
But he's like, don't you dare, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so I did it. And at the time, I had a very strong work ethic, thanks to my dad growing up on a farm. Had a very strong work ethic, had a decent attitude, but I thought reading was dumb. Like, I just thought, I'm a kid, I'm outside doing hunting, fishing, all that kind of stuff. And it changed my life. I read the book. I actually loved the book. I loved the topic. I loved personal development, business, all that. And I loved presenting. Now, I wouldn't have ever said that out loud. Like, I love presenting to the class. But internally, I knew that I was well suited for it. And it felt good. And people got value from it. And I was confident, and it gave me confidence. I read 54 books after that in 12 months, a little more than one a week on personal development, business, sales, leadership, all that. And fell in love with that. And that changed my mindset from super small town, which is nothing wrong with that. There's good qualities, but it expanded my worldview. And I said, okay, if these 100 people in history can go from where they were and they can achieve the heights, then why would I think that I'm any different? Why can't I just go apply these skills and start at the bottom and work my way up, like Andrew Carnegie, like Rockefeller, like Henry Ford, like all these presidents that started with nothing and then became the president of the United States? Why can't we do something like that? And then that led me to some mentors in the business world. Age 19, I dropped out and went and sold insurance, made $14,000 my first year, but then I got some traction. 45 the next year, 80 the next year, 160, about double every year. And about when I was at 160,000, I was feeling pretty good about myself. I'm 22 years old at the time. I hired a marketing coach. And I said, if all these people can utilize social media to make all this money, why not me? And we started doing webinars and Facebook ads and YouTube ads, and I just skyrocketed. And that's kind of the story of how mentorship really did change my life. Books and then physical coaches that I paid for.
God, man, if somebody can do it, why not me?
Yeah. You're not any different. You're not less special. You did it.
Did you ever see that old movie called The Edge?
No.
It was I can't remember the dude's name. Check it. So it's the old school. Okay, Silence of the Lambs guy. Who's that actor?
I'm bad with acting.
I'm terrible.
Names,
Obviously, I am too. All right, we can share that too. That's the actor, and then another one of the what's that?
Anthony Hopkins.
Okay, and then one of the brothers. Come on, you're gonna know this. It doesn't matter. Damn it, I'm botching the name. It doesn't matter. But the point is, that movie where it was about Anthony Hopkins. He's like this rich billionaire, and he goes, on this plane ride. They're doing some model shoot. He's married to this model. So, but he's also like very aloof with his entourage because he's a real like man's man portrayed in the film. And they end up getting like plane crashes, like a little prop plane in like the wilderness. And there's this bear coming after him and they have to kill this bear. But the sentiment that Anthony Hopkins kept coming back to in that film is he was like, we have to kill the bear. And they're like, what do you mean we're going to kill the bear? It's like a 900-pound Kodiak bear. Like, we're going to die. And he's like, if one man can do it, another man can do it. He's like, somebody can do this. Somebody could kill this bear. And if they could kill this bear, why can't we kill the bear? And they, obvious surprise, they killed the bear. So, the movie should have been called The Bear, actually, but it's called The Edge. But that, I remember seeing that when I was like 18. And that movie, I actually watched it again recently, just like 2 months ago. And that sentiment always stuck with me. And it has always come back to like, dude, somebody can do this. Like this is something that I've been thinking about in the last several years as well with the podcast, because interesting thing about the podcast in general, no one actually knows somebody who's done it. Okay. We all know Joe Rogan. Sure. We all know Theo Vaughn. We all know pick your favorite podcast. We all know somebody out there, but we don't actually know them. Right. You got a marketing coach. I got real estate mentors. It's fine. Great. Who's your podcast coach? Right? Like, where's this is one of the most publicly visible things that we've ever had in the entire world, and nobody knows how to do it. Right now, we can hire people and we can dump a ton of money, and like we can spend $20,000 per episode to get the views boosted up on YouTube. Like, yeah, we could artificially make something, but if you actually want to have one where people voluntarily find it and organically grow it and like all these things, nobody actually knows somebody who's done that, like on a big scale. So for this, over the last bit, I've kept thinking is like, dude, if somebody can do this, I can do this. Like, what is it? What is it? And continuing to improve and improve and improve. It's like, somebody's going to do this. Like I can.
What drives you, dude? I'm just listening to you talk, and you have so much passion, which I think many people discount how important that is. People out there say, oh, passion's, it's not that important. You just got to do something. I disagree. I think it's a lot of the velocity in life that takes you places is your level of energy and passion behind it. No. You've got so much of it. What drives you?
Well, I mean, thanks for coffee.
Coffee, but like, why even do this? Okay. Like, why even there's a lot of things that would deter you over the past couple years. Why do it for another 5 years?
Well, okay. This is not a political conversation, okay? But is there any denying that there has been incredible value from having like Rogan, right? Like, that's pretty wild, right? In the absence of his conversation with now President Trump, has anybody heard Trump talk for more than like 35 seconds?
Right.
No.
How do you get deep with somebody?
How do you bring like that? To me, it's so curious. It's like, wait, there literally is nowhere to understand this person. There's nowhere to understand who he is. There's no one to understand full context of things. Like, there's such incredible value there. In the absence of that, everything most people knew about Trump was based on inherent filtration mechanisms, right? So our legacy media systems are inherent filtration mechanisms. Margaret Carmel with Boise Dev. I really like Margaret Carmel. She comes on the show all the time, but there's no avoiding the fact that Margaret goes and interviews people. I think she does a really good job. She goes and interviews people. Then she takes that interview, comes back, and decides what she wants to write. Yeah. So Margaret is the filter, right? Like, news media is the filter. And at some point, you can say, all right, look, even if we like Margaret and even if we like every single news media system that we have in place right now, acknowledging that that's an unbelievable amount of power to be placing in one industry that really determines all of our worldviews. Even if we like the people today, what if there's somebody we don't like tomorrow and they still have all that power? Right. That's crazy.
That actually is what happens with these big news outlets. There you go. They control the narrative.
That's bad. Okay, we can just say categorically that's bad. Yeah. What's the alternative? It doesn't exist. Okay? Except for Rogan. Except for Theo Vaughn, except for these mechanisms, these communication mechanisms that somehow did something. And like, you can't, like, how are you going to reproduce Theo Vaughn? Like, you're not going to do that. Like, how are you going to reproduce Rogan? Like, you can't do
call the president dog.
Talking about doing cocaine and cutting through a wall. Like, you can't do that, right? Yeah. I had Senator Jim Marishan, and he was talking about how in the first 30 seconds, he was talking about how he had just flown in for, the holidays or something. I was like, hey, do you ground yourself? Do you take your shoes off and like rub your feet in the dirt? And he was like, what? I was like, like the beginning of Die Hard, like Bruce Willis is in the Yokohama Tower or whatever, like grounding himself, which I thought was hilarious, right? Anyway, but in the absence of that, we all lose. We all lose. We as a nation lose. We as a community lose, right? I was talking to somebody the other day about, I was talking to my barber the other day, and he made a comment about our governor being a rhino. I'm like, look, I'm not even telling you you're wrong. I'm just asking how and why, because I want to know. And you know what his answer? I don't know. Like, he didn't have a single policy. He didn't even have an article he could send me, which means this guy's worldview. And I really like this guy. And we had this great conversation. And again, it's, look, your worldview is being formed by systems that are in place that have no obligation to reality. Now, whether or not you view our governor as a rhino or not as reality is irrelevant to me. But my point is, if I tell you my position on him, I'm going to be able to tell you exactly why I have those positions. And if everybody functioned in that way, we would overwhelmingly be a better community. Not because I know what the answer would be. If everybody knew all the facts, how everybody would answer, I have no idea. Yeah. But I do know that it would be more honest and it would be a better Idaho solution if everybody knew. Yeah. So at the end of the day, we can look at the situation we're in and say, like, damn it, man, this is a bad situation. It's like, okay, you know the answer. It's just impossible to do. So are you going to try or not? Or are you just going to sit around? And look, when I was younger, I always thought the answer was retiring early. I always thought that was the answer. It was like, I got to retire. This is going to be great. I'm going to retire. And I was like, my wife and I worked 7 days a week all through our 20s. We killed ourselves. We didn't go skiing. We didn't go to the beach. Like, we would work 30-hour weekends, bottle, belly up to the full week, Monday through Friday after that, killing ourselves. And we took a lot of heat from our families, from our friends. They're like, what are you guys doing? Our answer was always, we want freedom. We wanted freedom. They're like, you just want stuff. I'm like, if I want stuff, how come I'm driving a Scion TC? Okay, like, I'm not driving a fancy car and then I traded up for a Prius. Like, we wanted freedom. Yeah. When I got freedom, it was probably the worst year of my life. Because why is that? I sell my tutoring company. I moved to Idaho, and I'm sitting around and I realized there's no reason to get out of bed. Because if you don't get out in the absence of you got to get out of bed for your kids, your wife. Okay. And then what are you relevant to somebody? Are you important to anyone? If you died today, would somebody's day be worse off besides your family? Is anybody even rely on you to make them a latte? Dude, like, do you have any?
And how does that feel in that moment?
Dude, I'm telling you right now, it was the darkest year of my life. But again, the answer is not freedom. The answer is the value of obligation. That's what we're doing. That's what we need to find. I have something right now that drives me to wake up at 4:30 in the morning, go into a dark studio where there's no one there. There's no boss. There's no coach. There's no rah, rah, rah. And I'm going to start editing and start interviewing people until I'm almost dead at 5 o'clock in the evening. And then I'm going to go home and I'm going to show up the absolute best I can for my kids and my wife. And I do. And then at 9:30, I enter into a non-medically induced coma and I die for 7 hours. And I wake up and do it again. But it's like, dude, this is it.
It's living.
This is my piece. This is my dumb little piece to this community. Because you know what? No one else is doing it. Yeah. Nobody else is showcasing Governor Brad Little. Nobody's showcasing Lieutenant Governor Scott Becky. Nobody's showcasing Senator Jim Risch or Senator Crapo or Congressman Fulcher or Simpson. Nobody's bringing these people to Idaho. Nobody else is doing it. Okay? Somebody needs to do it. Because in the absence of somebody doing it, our worldviews about these people are going to be determined by random people on the interwebs that have no obligation to reality, that do not want the best for Idaho. I object to that. I happen to be in a position where I can do something about it. And that's it, man.
You are firing me up right now, because like he who lacks purpose is going to be distracted by pleasure, right? Like in these moments where you don't have a purpose, the dark days, like what are you going to do? Drink margaritas on the beach all day, every day? Like that's just going to get old, right? What are you going to do when you wake up and have nowhere to be? I went through a similar experience. This is why I'm so fired up. we sell our company, our majority stake in our company.
You think you've arrived.
And you're like, everyone's like, and everybody else thinks you've arrived.
Oh my God.
Your life should be
This
so
must be
perfect.
so great. And then you wake up and you're still in your pajamas at 10:30 in the morning.
And you're like, what am I supposed to do? Right. And what I love about what you're saying at the end there is like, nobody else is doing it. I love the question, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? Nobody is so much more special. The people that are out there doing it, they're not more special than you and I or somebody listening to this right now. They just did it. They might have some natural talent, sure. They might have got some coaching, sure.
Right.
95% of things are learnable, all these skills. And they just went and they just said, screw it. I'm going to just start today. We got a podcast and I'm going to interview my HOA neighbors.
Yeah.
And I have a podcast.
They were arguing over how long. This was one of the things. People were pissed about people leaving the trailers on the street because people were like, in summertime, load up the trailer, the whole thing. They were like, you can only leave it there for 48 hours. And what I found funny about that is like, how are you going to enforce that? You have an HOA dude with a little orange light on the roof come through every 2 weeks. How do you even know if it's been there for 48 hours? You have a one shot. You came in on Tuesday. Do you know if it's there on Thursday? You don't even know. This is an unenforceable rule because you literally don't even have the information. Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm telling you, the only thing that got me out of that, and by the way, I had started the podcast during this year that was really dark for me. And I had started it, and about 6 months in, I realized I was like, okay, the way I've been living my life is over. It's over. I can't do this. I can't hang around and drink beers and fire pit with my neighbors, 3-4 times a week. This is terrible. I've never been, I'm a worse dad. I'm a worse husband. I'm a worse person.
And everybody says and thinks that you should be better at those things because you're home all the time now.
Yeah.
That's a myth.
Yes. And the people, you surround yourself with people and you slowly become those people, right?
Sure.
So the people that were fire pitting and drinking and hanging out all the time are like, what are you doing? Why aren't you coming out with us? I'm like, no, I can't do that. Yeah. But why? What is it? So the only thing that pulled me out of it was I realized is I need obligation. I need it now. I need to bring value to a community. And again, I had a one-line resume. From the age of 22 till the day I moved here, it was SAT tutor. I don't even have a reference. I don't even know what a resume looks like, right? I was literally just a one-man show with very specific skill sets. It was okay, I'll just do this and I'll do it really, really well.
You got a bunch of kids in hoodies running around the United States,
my
though.
God,
You could call them.
it's true. So the only thing that got me out of it is I started training. So I'm big into jiu-jitsu. I've always done it. I started training twice a day, every day. So I forced myself to go to the 6 a.m. class and then I'd be back at noon. And instantaneously, all of a sudden, my sleep got regulated because I'm passing out by 9 p.m. So I can't stay up late. Okay. Sure. Instantaneously, I got to be really specific on food because I'm burning a ton of calories, right? I have to start taking care of myself again. I'm way chilled out. I mean, look at my energy level. I gotta beat the hell out of myself like a sled dog every day or else I just lose. So all of a sudden I'm chilled out, right? I no longer have anxieties or I'm less responsive or reactive when, my kids are getting loud and crazy. All of a sudden, all of these things start falling in place. My sleep is regulated, my diet's regulated, my mental state's regulated. I have regularity with where I'm going to be. It's no longer a question. It's I got to do this, blah, blah, blah. Everything starts falling in line. Now, mind you, I love teaching. I love teaching jiu-jitsu. Great. But that's not I'm not starting my own school. I'm not that guy. I'm not like a McDojo guy.
Sure.
So it became, okay, look, this is good. You've made a distinct step forward, but what now? Is this where you want to bring the most value for the remainder of your sad days? And I was like, I think I could do more. I like this. This is great.
I like jiu-jitsu.
I like jiu-jitsu, but is that really the most impactful thing? And by the way, I think in a different life, maybe I would have been a jiu-jitsu school owner. But one, I don't want to have to mess around at 7:00 at night when I want to be home for dinner, right? So you got to do evening classes, right? I also distinctly object to any professional engagement where your physical capacity is tied to it. All it takes is one blown disc, it's all over. So I could build up some school and have success and then blow out my knee and then the whole thing's gone. So there are these parts okay, I can't mess around in that world. But again, I started looking for, okay, this is it. The obligation, the bringing value. This is it. Where then? Find where to point, right? And I had started the podcast. I was okay, it could be this. It's all right, then do that. That's it. Then do that.
Yeah.
Stop thinking, stop waiting, just do that and see if you can do it. and just keep doing it. And that was, dude, and if I tell you the date, you can see where the podcast starts like, and then all of a sudden little like breaks start happening.
And it coincides with what's going on inside of you as well.
Yes.
The power, two things here, like the power of purpose, the power of just, like you said, obligation. There's the power of like, it wasn't even some crazy thing. It's not like you decided that you were going to, what Elon's doing with Doge. It's not like you decided one day, I'm going to go change the entire world. No, you literally said, I'm going to go to jujitsu twice a day. So it took you from a dark moment where it's like a lot of anxiety, I'm guessing, and just like, what am I doing with my life?
Oh, terrible, yeah.
To even something as small as committing to jujitsu twice a day. Having that, I have to get up, I have to go, I have to take care of my body, I have to. Even that has the power to change your life. And then you're like, okay, from here, what's the most intelligent? What can I go after? I think too many people, especially young people, have a lot of anxiety around, well, I didn't arrive yet. I didn't get there yet. And like, I got to choose now at age 19 what I'm going to do for the rest of my life in one category. Dude, you're out here just saying, I just decided to do jujitsu one day, and then I decided to do a podcast one day, and then that kind of took off. I also did a bunch of stuff in my past. Don't you think that sometimes they just have to put the reps in to just like figure out even what you want to do?
Yeah, look, here's the thing. I don't like the sentiment that it's like, oh, always do what you love. Okay, like, fine. Like, yeah, like I think that's an important thing. I also think it betrays and delays a lot of people because they get into analysis process. Like, do I love it? But do I love it? Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh. I do think that's a problem. But I also think that sentiment ties deeply into you're going to need something that will sustain your effort through the pain of what you're doing. Right? If you're doing the thing that you love, people are like, well, I do what I love, so I never work a day in my life. It's like, well, I hope you feel that way because you're going to have like terrible days in this engagement and you have to find that love, right? That you have to fall back onto that love, to that other value, that, the most core value of like deeply, I love this. So I can tolerate the pain. When it's great, it's great. And when it's terrible, I can get through those moments. That's a real valuable thing, but you're not like, there is no arriving. Yeah. There is no like, oh, I've arrived. Dude, this is really embarrassing. I'm going to tell you this.
Oh, I can't wait.
So,
now,
dude,
I'm on the edge.
Oh my God. So I'm 19 years old and I'm walking across campus and these two people come up to me. They're like, hey, do you have a job? I'm like, no, we're on a college campus. I don't know if you knew, but like, no. And they're like, well, we'd love to offer you a job. I'm like, oh, because I'm so intelligent and awesome. Like being a floor guy at Abercrombie and Fitch. I was like, oh my God. So I go be that guy who walks the floor at Abercrombie and Fitch, Matt at 19. And I'm like, cool, man. $8 an hour. I had to take the bus from my apartment to BART. I had to take BART, which is like the metro. I got to take BART into the city. And then I got to take and then so it was cost me like $10 every day just to get to Abercrombie. I'm making $8 an hour. And then of course, if I get a lunch break, I got to go buy lunch in the city. So it's like, there goes another $12. So it's like, all in all, if I work an 8-hour day, I made like $12 after taxes. I'm just like, what the hell is happening? But there was this guy there. So first off, at the time at Abercrombie, to be a store manager, you had to have, or an assistant manager, you had to have a degree. So there were all these kids, so they were 22, 23.
Sure.
There are all these recent grads that were like working at Abercrombie Fitch. Now, mind you, they're making like $25,000 a year. It's nothing. But this is like 2001, Yeah. And there was one dude who would come in and he was in charge of all of these other stores. Okay. And he was, I think, 25, 26. And he made, I remember I asked, he made like $67,000 a year. And he would go around. So when he would come in, and again, like the 25-year-olds, they were like, pissed because they couldn't go out on New Year's, or like they go out on New Year's but they had to open at 5 a.m. Like all these different things. And they were just kind of floating through. Like I remember one guy, he had gone to Chico State. I really liked him. And like we got into this big thing over like the tennis band. Like we'd buy these tennis bands, like switch arms. What do you do when you're 19 working at Apple? It's like, oh no, it was on the right hand. I switched to the left hand. I'm happy with the switch. Do you want it on your arm or on your wrist, or do you want it all the way up on your shoulder? Like
as a big topic.
A big topic for Sunday, right? Like that's. But this one guy would come in and he had only been with the company something like 19 months. And he was in charge of all of these different stores. And dude, I'm telling you right now, when that guy got in, he moved differently through that store. And I was like, what is his deal? And I remember talking to the store managers, they're just local guys. And they're like, yeah, he works hard. I'm like, the way he talks, the way he moves, his intention, like, what is he doing? Like that guy just set his sights on it. And he's like, I'm in. I am all in. And I'm going to do this. And I have no idea where the guy is. I was 19. I worked there for like a month and a half. But it was like, looking at it now, it's like, that guy crushed. I don't know where he is, but he crushed. Like the way he moved through that store and dealt with people, I was like, this guy is not messing around. And that's, I think, what all young people can do. If you stop worrying about the stupid tennis band on your wrist and you start walking with a direction, just go that direction and go hard. And I swear to God, man, like you did, read every single book of whatever chosen thing you want to get into. Read every single book on that topic, not in a day, not in a week, over a year time frame. Stop overestimating what you can do in a month and focus on a year. Stop overestimating a year and focus on a decade. Okay. But get after it, have staying power. Don't be so easily to be dissuaded after the first bump or after the first, like, I'm not that interested. It's like, yeah, nobody's that interested for that long. Like maybe I am, but like whatever, like nobody's that interested. You keep going forward. And pretty soon after like 24 months, 36 months, people are like, who is this guy? It's like, yeah, because he read 100 books and kept pushing. That's in 3 years. That's under the time it takes for an undergraduate education. You know what would happen if you took a 19-year-old committed in 3 years and you're like, read these 100 books and start walking, son. Like that guy's going to crush. That gal's going to crush. You just have to pick a direction and start walking.
Amen. And like people get so hung up on the fear of it, I think. It's like, right? Like, should I do this? And am I going to, like you said, am I going to love it? Well,
we're going to love it.
Who cares if you love it in the beginning? Who said that you're going to sign up to sell t-shirts? Let's say you start a t-shirt business at age 17. Who says that you're going to sell t-shirts when you're 80 years old? You're probably going to do it for a little while, figure out some lessons. It's going to lead to another niche, and then you're going to do that and get a little more success. Then you're going to start something else, and it's going to fail miserably, and then you're going to do something else, and it's going to be a big success. And I feel like so many people are so scared. Maybe tell me a time. This is a question I have. Tell me a time that like you were like probably like the scaredest to make a decision. Like it was like the biggest stakes and you said, screw it, I'm doing it anyway.
Dude, I've had a lot of those times. They're the worst. Oh my God. My hands are sweating now. Just thinking about this. This is terrible. Okay. I graduated at the end of 2004. I started my dumb tutoring company and like bumbling along the way. It wasn't dumb. It was great. By the time I'm like 25, I'm making 200, working 7 days a week, working real hard.
Yeah.
And doing right by my clients, right? Like everybody was good. But 2008 hits and dear Lord, man. And by this time, because, I listen to my real estate friends. They're like, oh, real estate's the place to go. Now, you may not remember, 2006, everybody thought everybody was gangster going out of style in real estate. 2008 hits like, oh my God, what did I do?
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is 2008 hits. Two things happen. One, I'm horrified that like the tutoring is going to dry up. And I remember it was like January 3rd, probably 2009. I looked at my schedule for like the coming month. It's like, I don't have any students, or like I got like 20% of the students I normally have. Like, this is not good. And I remember sitting there for like, I don't know, it was probably under a minute, but a really painful minute where it's like, what am I going to do? It's like, you know what to do. Pick up the damn phone and start calling people. Pick up the phone and just check in. Don't pick up the phone because you don't have anybody to call to actually make money. You've already made money from your clients. Check in with them. Find out. So I, engage in that. And as you would think, it's like, okay, things start happening. And it's not even that the people I called were like, oh, come back for more tutoring. But it was that good vibe into the world. It's taking care of people. It's making feel like you actually care. And I did. And again, part of the process. I was too young to really believe. Now I absolutely know it works. But I was going through that motion, going through that process. That moment sticks out to me because it's like, dude, you got two decisions to make. You can only do one of two things. Like, you can freak out or you can take action right now.
Yeah.
And like, you got to do it. And I don't take a lot of time to make those decisions. But the other
that's
big
why you're
piece
so
of that,
successful. Excuse me for interrupting, but that's why you're so successful. That is, I believe that.
Well, I'll take
the
your
more
word for it.
the more I watch it. The more I watch it, it's like the quick decision to say, yeah, everyone feels that 1 minute, 2 minutes. You let it go for a minute or two. Some people will let it go for a year.
Some people let it go their whole life. Like some people just give up. It's over. It's like everybody's happy.
The market shifted, and it's all these excuses, right? And it's easy to do. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not pontificating here. Like, it's easy to do that. And then like be scarcity mindset. But what you said, if I could summarize, you tell me if I get it right, activity breeds results. And when you were sitting there and you're like, I could either wallow in self-pity and say, damn, the market shifted. I lost all these clients. I'm in a bad spot. What am I ever going to do? You just sit there and say that for a long time. But you can have those feelings because you're human like anybody. Right. And then say, pick up the phone and just start making calls. Even to people that can't buy what you're selling. Right. You're just causing goodwill. Yeah, and like the action itself will breed the results in weird ways.
In super weird ways. But and I am criticized at times by people who say, look, why did you act that? Why did you make that decision? And it's like, listen, somebody's got to make a decision. And do you know the right answer? They're like, no, but that obviously has a bad potential. I'm like, okay, the alternative is this. That has a bad potential too, right? They're like, yeah. I'm like, right. So neither one of us have an option that doesn't have a bad potential. You're going to have to make a decision. Which one? And most people fall into paralysis. They're like, well, I can't. They're both bad. I'm like, I know. But that's why we're the adults in the room. We make the decision in the face of overwhelming bad options. Now, do I always make the right decision? No, absolutely not. But I've made it. I'm moving forward. Even if I'm moving forward like only slightly, it's like sailing upwind where you got to go left and right and left. Yeah, I'd like to go straight to the right decision. Well, guess what? I'm an idiot. Okay. Like I make bad decisions and I go left and sometimes I get blown backwards, but I'm going to tack left and right until I can make it upwind. That's what you have to do. And if you're waiting for that straight line shot, man, there is no straight line. I don't know what I'm doing. I made a decision. Okay, fine. Like it was a bad decision. Okay, great. Color me surprised. Just add that to the stupid list. Okay, but am I moving forward? Do I at least now know why it was a bad decision? Do I have a better orientation for future decisions? Yeah, I do. And guess what? Maybe I won't make that decision again, or maybe I'll make that same decision with different circumstances. But like, at least I made the call. How many calls did you make? 0? So you're still sitting where you were? Okay, great. How's that working for you?
And the current just brought you backwards.
Now you're moving backwards.
You can't stay in neutral. Our family has a joke, and it's really a half joke. Half jokes are full truths. And I say, look, there is no neutral in this family. We don't sit in neutral. You're either going to go forward or you're going to go backward in life. So let's just make some decisions. And like you said, if it's the wrong decision, we're going to learn some really good lessons, maybe some really hard lessons. But guess what? We can recover from that. I bought a bar of all things, dude. I am, what was I, 24 years old.
This is my best option in life. Right now today, I'm going to buy a bar.
Just really
shots, everybody.
I'm 24. I have two kids already. My wife and I have two kids.
Great. That's the time to buy the bar.
We're making we're making $1 million a year in our insurance business at the time.
Damn. Yeah.
And so we're doing well.
Great.
You'd think I'd be smarter than this. But I said, hey, come across my desk, the opportunity.
Sure.
And I was like, you know what? I'm a quick action taker. I don't want anybody else to buy this bar in small town Idaho. Like that's a risk, right? So I jump on it and I just do it. It was a terrible decision. It was not a good idea for me. Now, other people can buy a bar and it can be a great idea.
Yeah, right.
But for me, this was not in my wheelhouse. It had nothing to do with anything except for me and my brother watched too many episodes of Peaky Blinders. Like it's a mafia show where they have like the family like goes back to their own little corner of their own little bar. And I'm like, that's cool as hell.
Wait, do you even drink?
At the time I drank too much.
Okay, great. Well, at least you had that going. You were going to be your own best customer.
Yeah, I was like, and that's just cool. It's just cool. Like, like
let's buy a bar.
Gangster.
We these types of chairs with like the buttons on them and stuff. Yeah.
You can see my style. Like, I like this style.
I'm a big fan, by the way. I appreciate it.
You like the leather?
Yeah,
okay,
dude,
cool.
you know what? I like the brass nails. That's all. I've always liked that.
See, it's kind of like that cigar bar, gangster vibe, right?
I wish I could do cigars. I can't do any of that. I can't do that.
It hurts my throat too much.
It's terrible. This law enforcement, this leader in law enforcement in Idaho hit me up the other day. He's like, do you like good cigars and whiskey? And I'm like, oh yeah. I'm going to show up and be like, could I have a Diet Coke first, please? And just milk the Diet Coke for like a couple hours. I'm like, I can't do the cigars.
Yeah, you're like, I'll hold it unlit.
Oh Oh God, yeah, I'll hold it. You know what we should do? I should do that. Pull that maneuver where like I just chew on the cigar, as if that's any better. Like anyway, so you buy this bar. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No. I bought the bar, and it was a bad decision, but I made it. And you know what? I had to get something out of my system. I didn't know why.
Right.
Until like months later, after I sold it 8 months later, back to the original owners. It all turned out okay. I lost about $100,000 on the entire transaction. Sweat. And it's like, that's a big lesson, because it's 100,000 is a big amount. But it's on my balance sheet now is a negative 100,000 lesson in focus. And what it taught me, I didn't even know I needed this lesson, but I would walk into any establishment, any business. I'd go to a resort in Hawaii, and I would sit there. I had a disease where I would just get on my calculator and I'd be like, okay, so it costs this much. I'd run all the numbers. Costs this much, and there's this many rooms, there's this many days a year, this many occupancy.
I think we could make this work. I think I could do a better job than they're doing.
We should get a resort, or we should buy a restaurant.
Let's talk to them right now.
Exactly. And so like I had this. Like,
can I get you to go box my burger? Yes.
Yeah. I just kept doing that shit, and it was annoying. But like this cured me. Now it's like, no, I have a lane. I have a purpose in life. It's not just to walk into any business, anywhere, anytime, and think that I should own it or run it or come up with ideas. Like, it's a good thought exercise. But now I walk into places, I'm just grateful I don't own everything. I'm like,
thank God somebody else is dealing with this burger. By the way, send it back. It was not medium rare. See, I don't want to be the owner of the non-medium rare burger joint.
Yeah, it's true. Like, you just have to, and I corrected. We'll figure it out. If the worst thing is if you don't take the action. You just don't do anything.
To your point, there is no neutral, okay? Even if it's a matter of days, right? And normally days turn into weeks, turn into months, years, the whole thing. There is no neutral. The idea that from 20 to 30 is actually a really crucial biological time. So people are like, oh, 30 is the new 20, 50 is the new 30. It's like, that's definitely not true. Because what happens from 20 to 30 is actually the second greatest shedding of neurons in your brain, aside from like 0 to 4. Okay. So really? So you are, or in 20 to 30, you're going to groove the lanes that you stay in the rest of your life. Now, does that mean you have to do the thing you want to be doing the rest of your life in 20? Like, if you want to have a successful marriage the rest of your life, you don't have to be married at 20, right? You got married pretty early. I didn't get married until I was 26. I met my wife when I was 22, but you don't have to be married at 20. What you have to do is be taking relationships seriously and developing skill sets that will then allow you at 35 to have a successful marriage. Because you're like, oh, I have the skill set to sustain this through my 30s and 40s and 50s. If you just mess around all through your 20s, you don't develop any of those skill sets. So then you're like 38 and you're like, oh, this isn't working. This isn't working. Like, why can't I do this? It's like, yeah, because you didn't develop it. There is no neutral. Every day that goes by, we have biological things that are ticking by, right? But we also have potential ticking by. Okay, so for instance, with my current engagement, I am well aware this is the last one, right? So I'm 42, all right? And if you look at my 10-year time frame, it's like at 50, this is it. Like, there's no, because I'm not stopping until I'm 50, because I'm in it for the 10 years, right?
Yeah.
There's no pivoting at 50 for me. Like, this is it, man.
Like, this is what
I am acutely aware that if I'm fortunate enough to live to be 80 years old, 40 to 50 was it. Everybody knows 40 to 50 was it. This is your time. This is where you sharpened your teeth and sunk them into something. And then when you're like 55, yeah, if you got to, like, I would do whatever I ever had to do ever to support my family, like, of course. But it's not like I'm 55, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take on like my great life adventure. It's like, no, man, that was the adventure. This was it. And every day that goes by is one more day out of that 10-year time frame that I know is gone. It is gone, man. What did you do today to move the needle forward? It's gone. That potential is gone. You are one day closer to 50 where you will now be suboptimal. Dude, we do not have time to mess around. I don't got time. Like, there is no neutral. I can't take a break now and pick it up at 45 with the exact same potential. My potential's gone. The day was gone. The potential, like, look, social media, right? You publish something today, you don't publish something. That day is gone. You will never have the opportunity to publish something on Sunday again. That's it. And now, yeah, you can start publishing again today, but the opportunity that yesterday held with going viral, with hitting just the right person, with articulating something, with finding something that you didn't even know what was in your own content, that day is gone. It is gone forever. Your potential, if your lifelong potential of social media is 10,000 posts, you lost the opportunity to get to 10,000. It's over. And that's something that I think young people at least need to square with a little bit. If you lose your 20s, you took advantage of your 20s. I took advantage of my 20s. And my 42-year-old self, if I could buy my 22-year-old self a beer, if I could go back to when I was 24 and just be like, dude, I really appreciate you. If I could say thank you to that person who sacrificed himself for me and my family now, oh my God, I would do it. I owe that guy so much because he didn't waste my potential. He realized it.
So you don't miss some of these people. Some people have the opinion, and they'd push back on that.
Sure.
And they'd have the opinion, "Hey, live it up, travel the world, drink all the beers, drink it all
the beers,
do all this, party, men, women, boys, girls, the whole like chasing girls thing." What would you tell somebody like that? It's like, hey, you only have 4 or 5 years. Let's say they're telling their high school kid. Go out to college. I see this all the time, and it's crazy to me. Go out to college and live it up. You don't ever get these years back. You have your whole life to work.
Whole life.
What would you say to that?
Bro, you know this. You're not a success in the first step. You go to like success, overwhelming success. Now, people only see the last step. Okay? I look at the first. Success. And these successes may be months, they may be years. I'm a pig-headed slow learner at times. Some of my successes where it was like, whoom, it was like, dude, why didn't I just do this earlier? Like, God, what is wrong with you? I know people that go out and party and do their thing. And great, you got one life. Okay, who am I to tell you what the right thing to do is? I can tell you for me, for who I am, I cannot do that. It is not my thing. It is not my jam, right? I am not when I am most selfish, I am not helping myself, right? When I'm most selfish, I'm not helping myself. When I'm most selfish, I'm not helping my family. I'm not helping my friends. I'm not helping my community. When I'm most selfish and doing those things, I am of value to no one aside from that little bastard in me who's like, give me all the pleasure. It's like, that guy's a terrible person. Yeah. He's a terrible, scurrilous scoundrel who's just wants what? Like another margarita? Like for what? For what? What? Like what? So like, look, you want to do that. That's fine. And, I am not here to prescribe people courses of action. But the time I have felt most fired up and most grateful and most fulfilled and satisfied as a person are the times when I laid it out, man, and I had nothing left to give. And that's just me. Maybe somebody is most, pleasured when they're like, skiing and seeing the girls. It's like, that's fine, man. That's fine. You do you. But guess what? I don't know a lot of people who we all value, either as a nation or as mentors or as role models that were like, yeah, man, I slayed a 10.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about you. You didn't do anything. You didn't. Who's reading Dan Balzerian's book? Okay, like what? No, we read, David Goggins. You know what's so interesting about him? If you listen to some of the Rogan episodes with him, and again, I'm not like a David Goggins jock guy. Like I got a lot of problems with. I tend towards imbalance as a person, but I understood that I had to get that under control as a younger person if I wanted to have a successful family. Right?
Amen.
Because
no arguments for me on that.
And I'm sure you've had to square this too. Because look, us unbridled, if we don't care about our families, if we don't care about kids, oh yeah, I guarantee you and I could have both done a lot of bigger, crazier things, right? And again, that's not a life I wanted. So I had to square with that. But what's interesting about Goggins is he articulates the moment when he realized that there was a character that he had to become. He was like, I went from being David and I had to become Goggins. And he was like, what would Goggins do? Goggins get up 3 a.m., go running in the snow, and then jump in a frozen lake. Go, stay hard, because that's what Goggins does, right? Like that was his thing. And he's like, I had to become this person. And at some point, I think really successful people look at the scared little kid that they have been. And they're like, if you want to be this person, you're going to have to become this person. And that means you know what that person does. Like that person exists as a goal in the world, like floating up there. And you're like, what does that person do? That person gets up at 4:30. That person doesn't care about anything that happens today. That person's going forward no matter what. That's the person that I tend towards. That's the person that I feel most fulfilled with. Right?
Amen to
so,
that.
Yeah, man, people want to go like ski, see Europe, like great. You want to go like study the, whatever, like great. That's not for me.
That's not what's going to make me happy, right? And I look at it and I go, okay, just even this recent exit thing, you're looking and I'm going, there's two paths. I could take what my financial advisor at the time, he's no longer with us. He's still alive.
Wow. I was like, oh,
but
God.
He's no longer with
R.I.P. financial advisor.
He's no longer my financial advisor because he's like, well, look, and he was just doing his job. He was like, hey, you could retire. You're 27 at the time. I'm 28 now. You're 27. You could put all this money in, these stocks and these portfolios and all this stuff.
Sail off
and you get X amount of dollars, a year. You could live off it. You'll be worth a few $100 million when you die, and you can pass it on to your kids all tax free because we'll do all this special stuff. And I go, it took me about a day to it's a big decision. Like it took me about a day though. And I told my wife, I just said, babe, I don't want to go out like that. What am I going to do from age 27 to age 80 when I die or whenever I die? What's that story going to say? Oh, the first few years of his life were awesome, so he scaled the company, sold it, and then did nothing. Oh, and by the way, the stock market's cool, and your kids are now worth $100 million apiece and hate their life because they have no purpose because I squished it with their inheritance. You know what I'm saying? So I said, why even have generational wealth? Screw generational wealth. I don't even care about it. I don't need generational wealth. I'll teach my kids the lesson they can make it on their own. So what if I just went all out from age 27 to age 80 and I left it all on the court? Money, talent, time, safety even. I don't care. How about we go all out and see what happens? What can one life do? How many people can you positively impact? And I have a faith-based background behind some of this too, but I won't get into today, but it's very rooted in that. It's like, I believe that we only have so much time here on this planet, and then something else happens, right?
Right.
Have a theory there. But it's like, isn't that what life's about? So we bought the jet, and we bought a house. We moved here, right, to the Boise area, and we got this building, and we hired all this staff. And financially, we put $0 in the stock market. I'm not saying the stock market's bad. This is not financial advice. But I put $0 in that. It's less about, is that fiscally responsible of me? And more about, I want to put that obligation on me. That we've got to make it work again. I've got to make it work again. And I put myself in a moment of strength. I believe I made a decision that now, when I'm in moments of weakness, a couple times a week, that guy can't be a little bitch.
Right.
That guy can't now. I can't say, oh, I'm just going to go back and do this and it's all going to be okay. Nope, there's only one way forward. The boats are burned, dude. There is no option B. There's only option A. And it has to work because I put myself in that position again. Half of the week, you feel like that's a bad decision. But guess what? I can't go back now.
Man, I got to tell you, Matt from 4 years ago would have been like, bro, come on though. Like, that would have been lit. And I can tell you, I have done the same thing. And I have a very dear friend who's early 50s. He exited a company, took 25 with him, and he's got moved here, he's got a beautiful house, beautiful wife, beautiful kids. And he did not burn boats. And he wanders now. Like he's stuck in this position where he wants meaning and purpose. And like, he wants that, like, okay, I'm all in. But he also can't rouse the motivation to give up the luxury and success that he's surrounded him. He's like, okay, I want something that I care like super, super about, but I also like, only want to put in like 3 hours a day. It's like, you don't get both. You get the all in or you don't. You get the benefit of the all in or you don't. That's it. Yeah, and again, I'm watching this play out for him. Very successful guy. And again, very dear friend.
Yeah.
And I keep telling him, like, man, I know where you are and you're going to go around and around and around in this. Again, he's plagued by too much success, right? As opposed to the 15 or the 18-year-old who was like, what am I going to do? I have no success. And you're paralyzed and you don't have a direction. He has success and no direction. And it's like, just sink your teeth into something. Like, come get in there and you will find value and meaning. Like, I was a rower in college. I remember my rowing coach telling me this all the time. He's like, what do you think we're doing? I'm like, I don't know, dude, we're rowing. Like, don't ask me these weird philosophical things. Like, I can't.
I rowed a damn boat like you told me to.
Right. And the bottom line is he came down, he's like, listen, this is the most ridiculous endeavor ever. You're literally sitting in a carbon fiber hole with 8 other dudes rowing down a river from an arbitrary distance. What does any of it matter? And I'm like, well, I mean, now that you say it, I'm kind of like, it doesn't. He's like, that's the point. It doesn't matter in the big picture, but it matters to you. And it matters to you. You put everything you have here. You need something that matters to you so much, you'll put everything into it. That's it. Like, it doesn't even matter what it is. You're in a dumb boat, like going nowhere. You row in circles. Like, none of that's relevant, but it's relevant to you because you've decided to make it relevant. And that's changed you as a person, right? Like, that's what people need to realize. They just pick something. It doesn't even matter what it is. Just make it relevant to you. Sink your teeth in and the world will deliver meaning. If you just commit, you'll find the meaning if you just commit.
That's so good. And even though it might not be like world changing, rowing a boat, or for me in high school playing basketball,
right?
That was my one place where I was reading these books. I didn't have a business to apply what I was learning in these books. I didn't have a business to apply towards it. I was working on the farm. I was playing basketball, but I started learning the leadership stuff and going, what if I just apply that lesson, that tactic to literally being the captain of our tiny little basketball team in the middle of nowhere, Idaho. Right. What if I just applied that lesson there? Because that's where I'm at right now. You follow me?
Yeah.
And you're doing it with the boat. What if I just apply the discipline and the grit and all these things to this seemingly insignificant thing? But it's significant
objectively insignificant. There is no value there at all. Like, there's no world where you're like, oh, you changed the world. No, I didn't. I learned a process.
And then apply it to something later on. Kind of like your friend. You're talking about this friend.
We'll call him Ben.
Yeah, we'll call him Ben.
We'll call him Ben.
Ben's getting beat up today.
Benjamin.
You can't have the safety net and take the leap of faith at the same time. And the only place, and at least for me, the only place that I've found true meaning is always when I'm scared. Like, you're not living big enough, in my opinion, if you're not actually a little bit scared when you take the leap. It's like a big jump. It just makes sense. If it's a small jump and you've done it a million times, you don't get a thrill. Evel Knievel. You don't get a little that's not going to do anything. But when you just like jumping the whole freaking canyon, I bet he's a little bit scared of that. You know, that's a bad example because that's pretty dangerous. But
he didn't die from that particular thing, though, right? Like, he broke his back like 1,000 times. Yeah, look, I agree. You gotta have a moment where you're like, I am no longer in control. You have to have a moment where you don't know the outcome. You know what's interesting? I chat with my wife a lot. I drink a lot of coffee, chat with her. I actually like my wife, which is great. And I've realized this phase of my life is probably one of the greatest because I'm in an actual adventure. I don't know the outcome. I don't know how this is going to go. I don't have any guarantees or anyone being like, oh, it'll work. Who knows? I tell myself every day, it's going to work. It's going to work. Like, I've gone into meetings. Dude, I went into this meeting like 2 months ago. It was hilarious. I thought I was going to this meeting. It was going to be awesome. Can't give you detail. I'll tell you off air, but go into this meeting. I'm like, I'm going to slay. This is going to be great. It's going to work. I got obliterated. It could not have been worse. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I came out and I was with a friend of mine and I was like, that could not have been any worse. He's like, oh, I know. It was bad. I'm like, it's all right. It's going to work. Like, it's okay. They don't get it, but it's going to work. And I didn't even make it out of the parking lot before it's like, it's going to work. But it was just a reminder that like, there's no guarantee it's going to work. No. It's only going to work because you're repeating it's going to work and you're going to go to the next meeting tomorrow. That's the only reason it's going to work. There is no guarantee. You have no assurances. You don't even actually know if it's going to work. You've never done this. Like nobody you know has ever done this. Why do you think it's going to work? I believe it. I believe it. I'm going to make it work. Man, what an adventure.
One thing, if you don't do that, one thing's for certain, it won't work. If you don't believe it, you will take actions and it will never work.
Right.
So what's the alternative, right? So you have this big background in education. Yourself, you have this degree in rhetoric. You've had a training company. You did the tutoring thing. You're also like interviewing educators now and political things. I'm just really curious, like part of our mission is teaching the lessons that they don't teach in school, right, to young people. What are some topics that you believe should be taught in schools that is currently not being?
I spoke with a guy by the name of Reed Steffen recently. Now, Reed Steffen is on the Idaho Technology Council. He's also working on the State Department of Education has him working on a digital literacy council or commission, something. And one thing that I found incredibly interesting, because I was really skeptical. I'm like, what the hell is digital literacy? Like, all right, you're going to teach him like Google Docs or like Sheets or something like that's not. But what he actually said, he's like, look, digital literacy is not digital dexterity. I was like, that's curious. Like, how do you mean? And his point was that we all know that we don't know what the tech is going to be tomorrow. I was like, yeah, great. Well, hence the problem. Like, what are you doing with digital literacy? And he said, look, what we really want is not somebody who can necessarily use a specific program really well. Like, it's not that you got to code really well or you got to be great on digital graphics or you got to be great with, video editing. All of those are very niche things, right? Mm-hmm. What you need to be is able to learn new tech really fast, right? And I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. But so his emphasis on digital literacy is that you need to be able to learn. You need to learn how to learn really fast. So we were just chatting through this. I'm like, all right, so essentially everybody knows that within the workforce, they're going to have to use a streaming program at some point to do meetings, right? Could be Google Meets, could be SteamYard, could be Riverside, could be whatever, Zoom, Zoom. You could be anything. What you're saying is you have to be adept at really quickly having a program that you've never used before, but you know how to share your screen, you know how to upload docs, you know how to enter like breakout rooms, chat groups, all these things really, really fast. He's like, yeah, that's exactly it.
Like so know that there's a navigation pane,
right?
How to navigate
Exactly.
Things,
right. What's the little box with the arrow going up? Like that means upload. Like all of these different or share, whatever it might be. So essentially, what he was getting at is like you have to learn we have to teach kids how to learn really fast on various things. And so one hypothetical course, I was like, okay, so essentially we teach people all of these different streaming platforms. And then what we effectively do is give them a final where we have a program they've never seen. We know they've never seen because it's like a proprietary program and it has all these mechanisms and they only have 15 minutes to be able to accomplish all of these different tasks on this thing. They learned how to learn the different program. It's like, yeah. So the actual answer to why are we learning this is not because you're going to use trigonometry at some future point. The actual answer is you need to learn how to learn. You need to learn how to do things that you may not be interested in or have a propensity towards, but you can learn how to do those things really fast. The only skill I have in the entire world is that I can learn really fast. And I have force of will paired with that, and therefore I can do whatever I want. Because even if I don't know how to do what I want, I can learn how to do what I want, and I will force myself to learn how to do what I want. And that, my friend, is freedom, because I can learn anything I want. And that's the real answer to education. Education in high school in particular is not necessarily that you're going to use these individual skill sets, but you're learning how to learn over and over and over different skills, physics, chemistry, English, history, whatever. And yeah, you hope you learn valuable, discernible skills, penmanship, you learn how to think. I mean, golly, that is like one of the hardest things to actually teach somebody, like how to critically think. There was a big push in the 80s in the education world to try to teach critical thinking. And what they actually found is that in the absence of an actual argument, it's very hard to teach critical thinking. Like the argument is conflict, and they give people very specific parameters by which they can argue points. So you can't use non sequiturs, you can't use ad hominem attacks, like all the rhetorical skills that people engage. It's like, okay, now argue the point. And so you have to present problems in which people have to use all these different tools, and they can't use those tools. They have to use these ones to solve the problem. That's all it is. That's all education is. It's learning how to solve problems and learning to learn to solve problems. That's the actual answer for why you're learning these things in education. Now, you can blow that all off and say, I don't care about this class. That's fine. Do you care about getting better at learning? That's all you need to care about. That's
a much different perspective. And I love the classical approach to learning. Like when I went to a private, high school, very small, tiny, but our class was all of the humanities types classes, right? And not math. I'm not talking math. I'm not talking science, but everything else is pretty much, you would read the actual source document. So instead of going and saying, oh, we're going to read a textbook about the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution and have all these different opinions, we would actually, as a class, go read the Declaration of Independence, and then the teacher would pose a question to the class and say, basically what you're saying, argue this point.
Right.
Argue this point. And then you had some wacky people over here that would say something wacky, but they would get told, okay, so this defies these points of logic. That's actually not logical, so you can't use that or whatever. And it was very fascinating. Because you have young people, I mean, we're talking 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds sitting around having real discussions that are actually sounding much more intelligent, in my opinion, than anything you're finding in the media right now.
I knew you were going to... Yeah, man, because that's not a real discussion. That we're not, when you watch the news station, that's not an actual discussion. Yeah. There's no, what somebody told me recently, and I was, again, I talked to a lot of these guests offline. It's like, listen, why don't we just solve this problem? Like for real. Like, now look, I'm an idiot. I don't know anything about politics. Like, why don't we just solve this problem? It seems like everybody knows they're like, yeah, but there's no money in that. I'm like, okay, I hear people say that, but what does that actually mean? It's like, listen, if you run a campaign off of, I'm going to fix immigration, then you can rouse a lot of money by one, perpetuating the immigration problem and never actually solving it. And I was like, oh my God, right? He's like, likewise, you could run the opposite campaign where like, nobody cares about these poor immigrants. We need to save, the people here in America. We need to have compassion. There's no value in actually resolving that problem. You just need to rouse that base. So all of these problems are perpetual problems that will likely never be resolved because there's no money in doing that. And so what is the news media? The news media is an arm of perpetuating the problem and helping people orient themselves clearly to the problem, be worked up about the problem, be upset about the problem, and never solve the problem.
And nothing ever gets done.
Nothing ever gets done.
Well, that's why I'm really intrigued. And I've watched a few of your episodes, some of the larger ones. I'm going to start going through and binging it. But that's why, I'm very excited to promote your podcast, the Ranch Podcast, and what you're doing, because you're actually fostering real connections with real people. And you're saying, hey, so far, I see that you don't take a huge stance yourself on a lot of these. It's, hey, I got this person saying this, I got this person saying this. I'm just curious, what do you think, right? And you just let them talk. And most people, like you said, the 30-second sound bites you get in the news, that's a pre-scripted, pre-rehearsed, pre-recorded half the time, little snippet. How about getting somebody on for 45 minutes or an hour and a half and just hashing it out? And
seeing who they are. Like you find out who people are real fast, man. It's beautiful, and it's not being done, and it infuriates everyone. Like both sides hate me. This is like the left hates me, the right hates me. It's like I'm right over the target, and nobody. I think one big problem is nobody feels safe because they don't know what I actually think. And it's like, but you don't need to, we can be friends. We can have honest discussions. You don't need to know like deep down what my thoughts are. And like, I share them with some people. I'm like, well, like, first off, it's obviously really complex. And like, but like, try this one on for size. I had Representative Heather Scott in, who is Northern Idaho. People describe her as far, like very hard conservative. Okay, fine, whatever, no big deal. She runs this bill earlier in the session, the LGBT, it's the flag bill. Okay, so she ran a state level bill to outlaw any local municipalities from flying any flag other than the Idaho flag and the US flag. And I was like, okay, help me understand this, because like limited government, no big brother from the state. And like, if I live in, Murphy, or I live in Lewiston, and we decide as a community that we want to fly whatever flag, like, why shouldn't we have the ability to fly that flag? And she had an answer. And I'm like, okay, I see your position. Yeah. Whether I agree or not is irrelevant, but I wanted to know.
Viewers,
that's right. Yeah. What her position is. And we have 100% agency to be like, that's trash, or like, right on, man. I agree with you. Either way, it's just like, can you just tell me? And we had this great conversation. We were like laughing about it and stuff. She took a hoodie, it's like everybody got mad. And what was so funny is I've interviewed a ton of Dems there aren't that many of them. So I've interviewed almost all of them this legislative session. And when I had Representative Scott on, the left got super mad at me. It's like, how are you mad at me when I've interviewed and I've told you guys I'm more than happy to communicate with you? She came out and told her position. It flies in the face of your position. She's not mad that I interviewed you. Why are you mad that I interviewed her? And of course, everybody calmed down, but it's like, guys, this is how we actually talk. We sit down and understand each other. We don't have to agree, but damn it, man, can you just hear somebody out for a minute?
Yeah, and just listen to the other side. Right. I think that's what's going to be, you're building as much of a bridge as that can be built, because it's letting the actual viewer make up their own mind without a ton of spin and bias. And that's very rare. So I know we've taken a lot of your time, and I'm really appreciate you being on here today. Where can people find you? I mean, is the Ranch podcast the best place to go? Or?
Yeah, so you can go to theranchpodcast.org, right? If you want to go to the site, you can go to the Ranch Podcast on Instagram. You can go to the Ranch Podcast on YouTube. But it's just this logo, man. It's just the Ranch, and awesome. I post videos all day long on Instagram. What's really interesting about Instagram is I'm a geek for communication. Okay, so like one thing that I've really realized is there are obviously, as you know, differences in communication platforms, and Instagram is, I think, really fantastic because it gives you the capacity to have a long form conversation. So I'll post, 5, 10, 15, 20 minute clips, maybe once a day. And then I post a bunch of shorter ones that are like little appetizers. But what's interesting is the Instagram format is not a permission-based communication mechanism like it is with YouTube. YouTube is permission-based. And the permission is largely centered around what thumbnail you produce for that streaming piece. So you have to go through this whole decision-making process. You as a consumer, you're like, all right, first off, what's the title? Second, what's the picture? And that has nothing to do a lot of times with the actual content, because the content, people know the game is the thumbnail and the title. So the game is not to make the best, most informative piece of content. The game is make the best title and make the best thumbnail. My thumbnails are all like pictures of my guests, right? And what's interesting is if you remove that barrier to consumption, which is what Instagram does, because you don't decide what you're hitting on Instagram. The video is just rolling as you scroll through. You have like hundreds and thousands and millions of views on pieces of content that are relevant Idaho topics. Like I did one with Representative Jason Monks where he was talking about the grocery tax. And it's this 10-minute explanation. It's like, okay, how impossible do you think it would be to get anybody to listen to you for 10 minutes about a grocery tax? Like it's impossible, right? Try 50,000 people, right? And I got a hold of him. I was like, what would the alternative mechanism be? What, you fill Albertson Stadium and lecture people for 10 minutes? He's like, I know it's impossible. It is impossible that we could have informed this people. Everything's Idaho based. That's the whole point. I know there are national and international news that to me is largely just entertainment. It has very little relevance on my actual life. And I don't mean to be, lack compassion for the struggles of people throughout the world. But look, man, we have problems with ACHD. You want to know about the roads? You want to know about your property taxes? You want to know about the schools you go to? These are the things that affect you every single day. And nobody is doing them justice in the state of Idaho except the Ranch.
Dang. Go follow the Ranch.
Follow the Ranch.
Ranch Podcast. What a great name. What a great brand. And I just thanks for having real conversations with real people.
Yeah,
it makes a big difference, and I appreciate you being one of those people today.
Yeah, hey, thank you for having it. I don't do a lot of podcasts. I genuinely don't get asked that much too, because people don't communicate with me. But you guys reached out, man. What a pleasure. This has been great. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. Thanks.